They had a Bray Wyatt promo on the Titantron, typical Bray Wyatt promo where he's in the back in the shadows somewhere, cutting a promo on Dean Ambrose, very dark promo. And I have to say, I really wish they would cut the crowd audio during Bray's promos. This is not the first time I've said this. I've made this comment before. I make this comment about a lot of backstage stuff they do. You can't cut the crowd out of everything, but there are segments like this that I think are better if you do cut the crowd audio out of it. And I made that comment on Twitter, and boy, a lot of you have really soured on Bray Wyatt based on your reactions when I put that tweet up. A lot of people were like, no, this is great. It exposes how bland and boring his promos are. They need to keep the crowd audio and show how bored and indifferent they are. There's a lot of people out there who are very bored and turned off by the same repetitive Bray Wyatt promos over and over and over again. They are kind of repetitive, I'm not going to lie. I still like Bray as a promo. He just has to, I don't know, he's got to shake it up a little bit. And I don't know how he does that given his current character. So I can see where some of those people are coming from, but I think there was way too much hate on Bray for the promo. And I still maintain they got to cut the crowd noise out because it affects the show. It affects the show. And here's the other thing, and I've commented on this before, and it's one of those little Kevin Dunn things that drives me fucking nuts. And it's whenever there's a backstage segment with the Authority talking to Randy Orton, or it's an interview, whatever, any kind of backstage segment, they have this thing where they cut to the crowd, and they show the backs of everyone's head as either they're looking at the Titantron, or more often than not, they're looking down at their phone, because they don't give a shit about what they're watching on the screen, which is even worse when you see people are clearly not paying attention. I don't understand why they want to show the crowd being engaged. I guess it's one of the dumbest production things they do. It's a little thing. I nitpick it, but I hate it when they do that. And they started doing it a few years ago, and it just drives me nuts whenever they do it. Like, what is the point? It takes you out of the moment. When I'm watching a segment with a guy, an interview backstage, all of a sudden they cut to the crowd, and they show this panning shot of the crowd. Who gives a shit? Who cares? Alex Greenfield, who's a former writer for WWE, head writer for SmackDown for a couple of years, he did an interview on Jim Ross's podcast that's worth listening to because he also goes off on Kevin Dunn. He is no fan of Kevin Dunn, and he talks about what a lot of people have. He's not the only one. People who have worked in that company who say that Kevin Dunn is a jealous person. He undercuts anybody who he feels threatened by, whether it's a writer, an announcer, anybody. He, according to Greenfield, hates Jim Ross, and he told JR, he said, JR, whether you know this or not, Kevin Dunn hated you, and he thinks that Kevin Dunn had a hand in ultimately JR's downfall, because he's got Vince's ear, who knows what he may have said to Vince. So, not a lot of people are fond of Kevin Dunn, but he made an interesting comment that I thought was actually very, very sound, and that is, when he became the head writer of SmackDown, and I don't know how much influence this guy thought he had, but he said that he tried to get somebody else, somebody different, to run the production side of the SmackDown brand because his goal was for SmackDown to be as different from Raw as possible. That, to me, was one of the reasons the whole brand split was an epic fail. And for years I said, just end the brand split, end the brand split. And finally they did. It was a farce anyway for so many years. Even when they finally canned it, the brand split had really been dead for years. And people still will send me questions on occasion. Well, do you think they should bring back the brand split? Things are so boring now. Things are so bad. It's the same guys over and over. Bring back the brand split. No, they shouldn't bring back the brand split because these people are incapable of doing it the right way. If I knew they would do it the right way, I might endorse the idea, but they can't. And they won't. So I don't want to see a brand split. That's just going to make things worse. With the lack of depth that they have right now, you're going to divide the rosters? That would be a terrible move. And I think his point is accurate. If there was a way to somehow make SmackDown look and feel completely different from Raw, I'm not just talking the roster. I'm talking the way the show looks. The intro, when it goes on the air, the look and feel of the whole thing. That would be fantastic. I think that's what Paul Heyman was kind of hoping they were going for when they relaunched ECW on Sci-Fi back in 2006. It was going to be a more grungy, gritty, old-school version of ECW that wouldn't look low-rent per se, but it would definitely have a less polished look to it. And they chickened out, and they didn't do it. And what happened? ECW ended up looking like every other fucking show that they have, and it failed. because it was no different. It was like what today would be main event. That's what it was. Or in some ways, NXT, because you had some of the newer faces they would throw on there. CM Punk made his main roster debut as part of the ECW brand. I believe Jack Swagger did as well. So maybe it was like a hybrid mix of main event and NXT. But there was nothing about the show that differentiated it from Raw or SmackDown, except the roster. So I think Greenfield made a very good point there, and it would have been very interesting to get somebody else in there and say, listen, let Dunn handle Raw, and we'll have this guy, this production guru from the NBA that we're going to hire, and let him run SmackDown. And the whole show will just look and feel different. And obviously that never happened, and that probably is why Kevin Dunn was not fond of Mr. Greenfield. But I do think there is something to be said when it comes to Kevin Dunn and his vision of what the WWE product is. He has his little go-to devices, whether it's a certain camera shot, or remember when the Shield would come out and the shaky cam just drove me nuts. It was like, oh God, just please hold the fucking camera still, please. Oh no, we got to shake the camera up to make it look like it's just pandemonium and chaos. And like, part of the reason the show is so stale, there's a lot of reasons why the WWE product feels stale. Part of that is that everything looks the same. The Raw set. They invested all those millions of dollars to have their little HD set that can transform into, to put whatever logo, whatever they want on that screen by the entranceway. But when you look at Raw in the 1990s, and you look at Raw in the 2000s, and you look at Raw today, the radical change in the way that Raw looked from just 93 to 97, and then compare the way Raw has looked pretty much since the Attitude Era to the way it looks today. It's the same set. It's the big Titantron. It's the ramp, although the ramp now isn't really much of a ramp. I mean, the ramp used to be much higher, but it's the same damn set. Everything pretty much looks the same. The graphics and stuff may change. The music may change. But the basic look of the show is the same. There's been no radical transformation. If you the last time you watched Raw was 98, and you tuned into Raw now, you'd probably look at it and say, okay, now it's in HD, so there's more colors, but it basically looks the same. So there's a lot of different things about the show that are the same. Nothing really changes. Maybe it would with somebody else in that position, a different vision of what this show should look like, I think would really freshen things up quite a bit. I think it would freshen things up a lot. Wouldn't change the creative. That's not going to make the creative suddenly get good. But I think that has a lot to do with the staleness of the product. I really do. And as long as that guy is at the helm and he's in power, and I imagine he will be as long as Vince is around, then this is the way it's going to be. And I'm sure when that day comes that Vince is no longer around and Triple H and Stephanie take over, one of the first things they do is probably going to get somebody new in that catbird seat running the show from the production end, and I think that they'll be better off for it.